The movie opens to an excited college student Heather, who has arrived in France, as she has been admitted to study in the University of Paris. She takes in the scenery as she heads in that direction, traveling by taxi. Once Heather gets dropped off, she takes in the sights as well as photos of famous buildings. She sits on a wall reading a book about Paris, then goes off looking around the tourist hotspots. She goes to get something to eat and heads over to a coffee shop called Friends Cafe, but needs to brush up on her French. As she takes her coffee and food, she asks a young Dutch lady named Astrid, who is sitting by herself, if she can sit there. She is relieved when Astrid speaks English. They both start chatting and getting to know each other. Heather tells Astrid she is studying history of arts, following in her father's footsteps. Astrid is also studying art, but only chose the subject because she knows her father wouldn't approve. Two guys named Olivier and Pierre are having a disagreement about who would win in a fight and asks Astrid for her opinion. Olivier and Astrid are supposedly dating, so she tells him obviously he would win, and Pierre wouldn't stand a chance. Pierre notices Heather and asks Astrid who her new pretty friend is, when Olivier butts in and introduces himself, lowering his sunglasses and staring into each other's eyes, making Pierre jealous. Pierre quickly pulls Olivier's glasses back up and tells him to get his latte, while he pulls up a chair and starts to chat Heather up. Olivier comes back with Pierre's latte and tells Heather she should come out with them tonight and show her the real Paris. Heather's not so sure about going out with strangers and tells them she needs to rest from jet lag, but they manage to twist her arm and she agrees to go out. The next scene we see Interpol director Elizabeth, just finishing up with a phone call when Edward enters. She tells him to sit down and asks if he's been sleeping well, but he just wants to know why he's been called into her office. She breaks it to him that Interpol wants him gone as times have changed, and so has he. He doesn't seem thrilled about it and they take a walk. He tells her he only does his job, which is to capture terrorists. She tells him he's very good at his job, but the worst part is that he wants revenge because the terrorists killed his son. Since they have been friends for a long time, there have been times when she's looked the other way, but there is nothing she can do now, and that Interpol wants his resignation by Friday. The company is restructuring things and not interested in the 2005 London bombings anymore. They are only interested what happens now and in the future. He begs her for a little more time, but with no luck as politics and elections are involved. She tells him to give up and just go and enjoy his life. We next see a terrorist named Abdul soldering components to a device, while a picture of Edward comes up on the screen. It's evening. We are at Edward's apartment where he has pictures of suspects who are responsible for past terror attacks. Heather and her new friends are about to head out. They are on the rooftop car park, drinking and dancing before getting into the car and driving off. We are back at Abdul's place where he is mixing chemicals and powder together. He looks out the window and makes a phone call. Looks like he is waiting for someone and goes to the lift to meet the person. He looks disappointed as it was only Heather and her new drunk besties coming out. As they head towards their room, Pierre taps Abdul on the shoulder and says to come and join them. Abdul just tells them to get Pierre out of his face, which offends him, and his friends quickly drag him into the room to stop from causing any trouble. Olivier grabs some glasses and drink and they head out to the pool area. They strip down and jump into the pool, apart from Heather, who is feeling a little shy, but she soon gets more confident and jumps in. Meanwhile, Abdul is on the phone to an associate and tells him to find Rashid and bring the detonator, as everything is set up and they only have one chance, and also something about destroying some files. The gang are back in the room drawing white lines and smoking. They are all out of it and Olivier makes his way to the bedroom. Pierre gets closer to Heather and goes in for a kiss. They also make their way to the bedroom while Astrid hasn't had enough of the white stuff. Pierre thinks he's going to get lucky tonight as he goes in for more kisses, but Heather knocks in back, telling him she doesn't want to do anything she will regret in the morning. Heather can't sleep. As she walks into the kitchen, she sees Pierre getting lucky with Astrid. The next morning, Heather is in the kitchen drinking coffee when Pierre comes in and gives her a peck on the cheek. He's about to light up a cigarette, but she tells him to go outside. He goes into the hallway, and as he is about to light up, he sees Abdul's apartment door open and notices a bag with an explosive device. Pierre slowly walks closer to Abdul's door and hears him shouting down on the phone to someone. He walks in and takes a closer look at the device, completely oblivious that Abdul just caught him. As Pierre goes in a bit more, he's unaware Abdul is waiting and stabs him straight in his chest, making him drop and switch off the device. Abdul grabs the bag and tries to sort the device out. Meanwhile, Heather walks out looking for Pierre. As she walks towards Abdul's front door, she is shocked to find Pierre on the floor with blood all over his t-shirt. She comes in closer and makes a noise as she touches Pierre's face and he's unresponsive. Abdul hears her and quickly grabs her hair and throws her over the sofa. He closes the front door. Heather gets up and notices blood coming out of her head. He tries to catch her but there's furniture between them. Then she legs it into the kitchen, going head first into the cupboard. She is now cornered and throws mugs at him before running to a bedroom. She grabs a bag and throws it at him, making him drop. She tries to close the door but he stops her before kicking it hard, making her fall back. She tries to escape but comes to a dead end in the bathroom. He tries strangling her but gets a slap in the head before she gets her head smashed against the mirror. She is still breathing, so he has another go at strangling her. He doesn't seem very strong for a big guy and not doing a very good job, as she manages to pick up a piece of the broken mirror and stab him straight in his neck, finishing him. Heather gets out of the room and sits in the hallway crying and covered in blood. A young boy walks up and gets freaked out seeing her all cut up. He drops his bag and goes crying for his dad. Meanwhile, Olivier and Astrid are in the kitchen drinking coffee when they hear the young boy and go to take a look. They are shocked to see the state Heather is in and ask her what happened. Astrid gets some towels as Olivier asks about Pierre. She points to the room and Astrid quickly goes in and screams at the sight of Pierre. Olivier follows and can't believe what has happened to their friend. He notices the device on a chair and goes to the bathroom for medication when he sees Abdel lying there. Astrid follows, screaming her lungs out at the sight of him. Olivier quickly bags up the medication and tells Astrid they need to leave, as there is a bomb in the room and can go off at any moment. Olivier helps Heather up and go back to their room where he cleans up her cuts and the blood. Astrid tells him they need to call the police and Heather needs an ambulance, but he tells her the police is not an option as there are drugs in the room and he could get locked up. A few years back he made a deal with the cops and gave up a drug lord named Ravel, who happens to have the cops on his payroll, and Olivier is a dead man if Ravel finds his location. They move Heather to the kitchen while Olivier has a quick cleanup in the room, removing all evidence of drink and drugs, while Astrid is cleaning up Heather. As they leave the room, Astrid notices the scared young boy. Olivier goes up to him and tells him to stay inside and not open the door to anyone, and that the police will arrive soon. As Astrid and Heather enter the lift, she sees a guy walk by. He looks like a friend of Abdel. Olivier joins them and quickly closes the lift door, as they sense they could be in danger after the guy notices blood on the front door and he goes after them. The guy runs down the stairs to the car park, but he's too late as the three get in the car and drive off whilst being shot at. The guy phones his boss Eric about Abdel's situation and that there are no files or computer as the desk has been wiped clean. Eric angrily tells him to find them. The guy goes into Olivier's room and looks around, when he finds a photo of the three friends on the fridge. We next see Edward phone Elizabeth and he tells her straight that he is not resigning. Edward is at a conference giving a speech about the 2005 London bombings, and after several years of research, he has identified the top 3 snakes responsible. He goes on to say that to take these men down will ensure a total collapse of their terror organization, and that his team has taken down 12 of the 20 most wanted. Edward gets interrupted by Assistant Director Blanche, and informs him 2 bodies and explosive devices have been found in an apartment, and they identified one of the bodies as Abdel Farik. Edward ends the conference and leaves. He goes to the murder scene and the forensic team are already there. He questions the inspector about any witnesses and then asks about Abdel. The inspector takes Edward to the bathroom where he gets closer, and takes a good look at the man he has been after for many years. The inspector also tells him that they found 2 types of blood, one belonging to the person of interest. Edward wants to know who got to Abdel. Blanche brings up Olivier's name, whose parents are apparently worth a fortune, and tells him he was arrested for drug trafficking a few years back. He cooperated with the police, which led to the arrest of drug lord Ravel, and Olivier has been in hiding since. Blanche notices pictures pinned to the wall including one of Edward. Meanwhile, Olivier and Astrid stop at a pharmacy for supplies. Heather walks in noticing the CCTV. As they leave, the pharmacist quickly makes a phone call. Edward and Elizabeth are at her place talking about the day's events. He tells her one of the other terrorists, Omar al-Sarwi, was going to plant a bomb in Paris that day and he's worried about the safety of the trio. She's not buying it and tells him he doesn't care about the trio, he only wants revenge. The trio are at another house getting ready to eat. Heather's not hungry, but Olivier tells her she has to eat as she lost a lot of blood. Astrid asks her what exactly happened that morning. An emotional Heather tells her what happened and that they need to inform the police as she didn't do anything wrong, it was self-defense. Next at Interpol, Blanche informs Edward the toxic report on Pierre came back positive, and confirms he and his friends were at the crime scene, and also about the phone call from the pharmacist matching the description of the suspected trio. Blanche tells him she got the CCTV footage from the pharmacist on her laptop and proceeds to show him. She continues there were multiple prints at the crime scene but none of them matched Heather's. Nobody is reported missing, but they did manage to match Olivier's number plate to his car. The team are working on a warrant. She gets a phone call, then turns on the TV. It looks like someone has leaked the CCTV footage. Back at Olivier's, a video message appears on Astrid's phone. It is from a terrorist warning whoever killed Abdul. They must give themselves up, or many innocent people will be killed until they find who is responsible. They get startled by a knock on the front door. Olivier asks who it is. The person tells him it's security and he needs to check if everything is okay. Astrid and Heather quietly go inside. Olivier opens the door and the security guy tells him he noticed the garage door open, so he needs to check if everything is okay. Astrid comes out and tells him everything is fine, but he's not taking no for an answer. Olivier lets him in and he asks if it's just the two of them. He notices something and immediately takes out his gun. Olivier quickly grabs his arm and points the gun away from him. They both start fighting and punching each other, making the security guard drop the gun. Olivier grabs it and tries to aim for the guard but gets punched out of his hand. Astrid picks it up screaming and aims it at the guard but gets knocked out of her hands before she can pull the trigger. Olivier sees the gun on the floor, picks it up and shoots the guard as he runs towards him and falls on top of him. He pushes the guard off him and he and Astrid are both shocked at what just happened. They make their way to the garage when Olivier spots a guy lying there. It looks like the real security guard is killed. Astrid is about to make a phone call when Olivier tells her to stop, snatches the phone out of her hands, and throws it in the bin, as he tells her that's how the bad guys are tracking them. Heather makes an appearance and he throws her phone away too, then informs them they are going to Spain and need passports. Astrid disagrees and wants to call her father instead, but he tells her they have to go if they want to stay alive. It's morning and the trio have arrived in Spain. They stop near the sea and Olivier looks at a map. Heather is worried about what has happened. They're on the move again and park up once arrived at their destination. Back in Paris, Blanche informs Edward that Olivier's car has been spotted in Spain and she has a charter waiting at the airport. Edward and Blanche arrive in Spain and meet up with Commander Diaz. Edward and Diaz used to work together on the Madrid bombings. Diaz tells Edward that a manager at an establishment confirms the sighting of the trio and they head out. Olivier pulls up to a garage where he meets up with an old friend, Fermin. He tells him he needs a favor from Tadeo, who is at the back. A pretty young lady appears at the front gate and asks Fermin for a light, which he happily does and lights her cigarette. Her name is Carmen, Diaz's top intelligence agent. The team are closely monitoring the garage from the van. Diaz tells the team that Carmen would be the best one for the assignment since the area is a hotbed for working girls. Tadeo's not very excited to see Olivier as his face is plastered all over the TV, but he didn't know who else to turn to. Tadeo educates Olivier that Abdul was part of the Al-Sarwi network, which is a big fish for the Interpol. He tells them luckily, Interpol haven't managed to identify Heather yet, so she might still be safe for the time being, and then introduces herself to him. Tadeo continues that if the cops were to bust into his joint and find the trio, there would be nothing he could do about it. All the while Interpol are listening to the conversation from the van. Olivier is desperate and needs Tadeo's help with passports, documents and files, anything to get them out of there. Tadeo agrees to help, on one condition that he doesn't want to see Olivier or the girls ever again. He tells Olivier he will have the paperwork ready for the next day, but will cost him about 20,000 euros for his trouble. Olivier's not happy with the answer and tomorrow is not an option as they could all be in jail by that time. Tadeo tells him how is any of that his problem and that this is not a fast food restaurant. Things take time and Olivier needs to be patient. There's only one problem, Olivier doesn't have any money, but he has something else instead. His car. They have a deal and shake hands before the trio leave. Meanwhile the agents are keeping an eye on their very move. The trio enter a hotel room and Astrid starts freaking out that she doesn't want to run anymore and just go back home, and starts to blame Heather, saying Abdul should have just killed her. She becomes delusional and thinks there's something going on between Olivier and Heather and leaves. Carmen and another agent notice Astrid leave the building alone and they start to follow her. She starts freaking out again, thinking she's being followed, so she stops and looks around before moving on again. The agents in the van have access to the street CCTV cameras and see Astrid among the demonstrators. Edward orders Carmen to grab her and take her to the station. It's evening. Olivier is wrapping a bandage around Heather's arm, when she tells him this is not the type of adventure she had planned when coming to Paris, and that her life will not be the same. Elizabeth calls Edward and has a go at him, that she's getting calls from all over because he's putting the trio and other people's lives at risk. But he reassures her that the kids will be safe, and even jokingly recommends Heather for a job at Interpol for the way she took care of Abdul. As Edward is sleeping, he has a flashback of sitting on a park bench reading his paper when there's an explosion. He's next walking down a corridor. He enters a room and sees a body bag on the table. The coroner opens it, and inside is Edward's son. He immediately wakes up, takes his pills and examines some photos. It's the next morning. Heather awakes and starts blowing on Olivier's face, waking him also. They stare deeply into each other's eyes before she makes her move. He reciprocates and they start kissing passionately. Meanwhile, Carmen is back on duty as a working girl. She calls for Fermin. He's happy to see her but tells her she's on the wrong street as there are no girls working in that area. Carmen starts flirting with him, asks if he needs to relax and release any tension. She will give him a discount if he knows 2 or 3 other guys. But he knocks her back saying he can't before slapping her ass as she walks off. The next scene, Olivier and Heather are ready to leave when they spot Abdel's friend and another guy. Olivier and Heather make a run for it as the 2 guys chase after them. They run upstairs and find the exit to the rooftop and continue running. Olivier helps Heather down the side of the building. As he is about to go down, one of the bad guys grabs his bag but gets hit in the face for his effort. Olivier makes it down to Heather and they make their escape. All the while, the agents are keeping an eye on them. As the 2 bad guys make it down, there are 2 other agents waiting for them and they get caught. A photo is sent to Edward, who is in the van, to identify the 2 guys. One of them is Rashid, who Edward has been after for many years. Olivier and Heather go back to the garage. Fermin has to check him, in case he's packing. So he lifts up his t-shirt to reveal his 6-pack. He's clean. Now it's Heather's turn. She lifts her vest. She's clean also. Fermin radios to Tadeo, who tells him to let them in. As they meet up, Tadeo asks about Astrid. Olivier tells him she's taken her chances and going back home. He asks if the paperwork is all sorted as they have to get a move on. But Tadeo takes his time and tells Olivier that he still needs to charge for the 3 of them even though Astrid is not with them anymore, as they walk to his office. Carmen notices 4 suspicious cars heading her way and informs her boss. She doesn't get a response. There are snipers positioned in place. Tadeo opens a safe, takes out the passports and hands them to Olivier. As they are about to leave, Tadeo also takes out a gun and tells Olivier to sit back down. A group of men walk into the office, including terrorist Omar al-Sarwi and Eric. Tadeo asks Olivier if he knows any of them. He shakes his head. Eric takes out a photo and asks Olivier maybe he knows him. It's a photo of a young Abdel, whose father helped Eric many years ago, and that Abdel was his family. Eric goes to get the bag and punches Olivier in the face. He was looking for the laptop containing important files. Carmen is not getting any response, so she takes out her gun and goes in like a tough cookie. While Olivier is taken back down and handcuffed to the car lift. Tadeo raises the lift and grabs Olivier by the neck, making him spit on Tadeo's face, pissing him off, and gets one of his men to connect the battery. A big guy starts cutting Olivier's t-shirt and greases him up. Tadeo tells him it will all be over if he just tells Eric who killed Abdel. He doesn't get an answer, so Tadeo shocks him with the battery cables. The agents are watching everything that's happening. Heather can't bear watching Olivier being tortured, so she confesses it was her who killed Abdel. But Olivier takes the blame instead, getting tortured even more. Eric has had enough. He takes out his gun walking towards Olivier and gives him one last chance to tell him who the killer is. The snipers are ordered to shoot and a gun battle begins, while Olivier is still hanging with not a single bullet hole amongst all the shooting. Eric and Tadeo try to make their escape with Heather. Edward and his team go after them. Eric has been shot in the arm but still manages to shoot back. Tadeo gets shot, then al-Sarwi grabs Heather and continues to run. Edward shouts at Eric to stop. He turns around and gets ready to shoot, but too late. Edward got him first and he goes down. Edward looks around for Heather and sees al-Sarwi with his gun to her head. Edward tells him to let her go. It's over and there's nowhere to run. Al-Sarwi looks scared and tells Edward multiple times he will kill her. As Edward lowers his gun, al-Sarwi takes his chance and shoots him in the shoulder. As he walks towards Edward dragging Heather with him, she makes her move and pushes him against a car. He goes to grab her again. Edward sees his opportunity and shoots, throwing al-Sarwi against the car and killed. Edward is in pain and Heather doesn't know what to do. Then it comes to her to go and check him. He asks her what her name is. When she tells him, he has a smile on his face and dies. Consider that as resignation. Elizabeth is on the phone and tells the person to bring Heather to the headquarters in Paris, as she takes al-Sarwi's photo and throws it in the bin. Blanche and Heather meet up with the rest of the Interpol team when she sees Olivier. He's relieved she's still alive and goes and hugs her. Blanche comes back and tells them they will need to give a statement at the Interpol HQ and then they are free to go. Before she walks away again, Olivier asks what was on the laptop. She replies, everything from network files, plans of attack, names and phone numbers. She hands Heather a business card offering her a job at the Paris bureau, as they could use someone like her, as the strength and resiliency she has shown throughout this whole drama. Blanche leaves. Heather asks Olivier how does she look. Terrible, he says jokingly, before going in for a kiss. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more cool videos.